Take a couple of seconds. All right, let me just make sure we're live because sometimes I can't say for sure, but it looks like we're live.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. We definitely are. So give me a moment. Hey everyone, welcome to today's stream. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or even our Facebook group, make sure that you let us know that you're here, add a comment, or let us know, give us a like, give us a heart, because we are starting this stream right now. What's up, Action Tribe? AJ here, host and founder of My Seven Chakras, my7chakras.com, the show where we help you calm your mind, relax your nervous system, and experience deep states of bliss. Today's episode, we talk about some mind blowing topics such as the physiology of breathing, the various muscles that are involved in respiration, how breathwork can help you release stuck emotions, and how you can change your brain no matter what age you are right now. You are absolutely going to love this episode. So if you like the work that we do, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button right now or the follow button, because that will ensure that you do not miss on any future episode, and it will help more people come across our important message. And before we begin, let's listen to this really inspirational message by one of our listeners on iTunes. And she says, have you ever felt disconnected? The world has been going through a major shift with social distancing and isolation. I have felt out of sorts. This podcast has made me feel connected again to other like-minded individuals. The various episodes offer spiritual guidance, breathwork techniques, and amazing guests, and so much more. I highly recommend this podcast to all of you who need to feel grounded. I found this podcast at the right time, and so will you. Enjoy finding the beauty within yourselves with the help of this podcast. So, Action Drive, make sure you write us an iTunes review as well, because I will read it out for sure. With that being said, let's bring on our special guest for today, Ed Harrold. Ed Harrold is an author, motivational speaker, inspirational leader, coach, and educator. Ed's mastery in the science of breath has guided him to apply mindful, conscious breathing practices in the field, in the fitness and athletics industry, corporate wellness, and organizational performance systems, as well as lifestyle coaching for individuals. Ed's breath as medicine, continuing education trainings support the healthcare, health and wellness coaching, fitness, psychotherapy, and medical fitness industries. So, Ed, thank you so much for coming on our show.
AJ, thanks so much for having me. It feels so good to be with you today.
Likewise. It feels really, really good. And I think it's coming at a very opportune moment where I'm sure you'll be able to share some advice and some techniques and practices as well as your story with our listeners around the world. But before that, I'm hoping that we can start from the very beginning. How did things start for you? Where were you born and brought up?
I was born in a little beach town in southern New Jersey on the east coast of the United States. And I grew up about 100 yards from the ocean, and the ocean was my first love. Ever since I was just a wee tyke, my mom could always find me down in that water and playing in the beach. And that's where I really began the first experience nature and the risks and the rewards. How to interact with nature, how to interact with inertia, the power of the ocean and the power of the ocean, and just trying to interact with the environment as efficiently as possible. So being a young boy and the sheer scope of the ocean, it just stoked my imagination. It fed my dreams. It fed passions of what life could be like if I had the energy of the ocean.
That is amazing. And my question that comes to my mind is, when you were this young boy in front of the vast ocean, what did young Ed want to be when he grew up?
I wanted to be a lifeguard. I wanted to save people that might not have the experience of going in the ocean and being safe. So that making sure that the kids were safe and the mothers and fathers knew that their kids were going to be safe, because the ocean is a place that doesn't give you a second chance. And if you get into a dangerous situation, it can become very, very tragic very quickly. So I wanted to be in the effort of helping others.
And what about the ocean sort of inspired you?
Well, I liked the impermanence of how every day was different. Some days there would be big waves. Other days there would be small waves. Some days there'd be no waves. Some days there would be wind. Other days there would be no wind. Some days the current would come from the north. Other days the current would come from the south. And it just kind of brought me to the place of awareness that every single day of our life, the environment is different. And how can I interact with this environment for, as a kid, just to have joy?
You know, Ed, when I was a kid, um, I had this one fear when I was, swimming in the swimming pool, that I thought that, there was a shark that might come from the bottom and, and eat me. And also there was this fear of drowning. So were these factors in your mind at all, or was this what added to the excitement of being in the ocean?
No, uh, the sharks and the fish and all of that never came to my mind. I wasn't afraid of drowning, but after getting older and then going through a few near-death experiences in the water, where I was helpless against this immense force of water, I had so much more humility and respect for the great gift that the ocean brings to all of us on this planet.
Yeah, almost on every episode of mine, our guests share, that they went to one or two or multiple NDEs. Do you mind talking about your first near-death or close-death experience? What was it like? What exactly happened? And how did that shape you as an individual?
Well, my ego got me into big trouble one day. I was a professional marathon swimmer, and I'd become pretty proficient at it and pretty fearless. My longest race was 22 and a half miles, and I could just swim forever. I wasn't the greatest sprinter, but I could swim forever at a high pain threshold, and I thought I knew the ocean really, really well. And one day, I went out in the middle of a hurricane, and the beaches were closed, and the lifeguards weren't letting anybody in the water. But I said, I'll be okay. And they knew who I was, and they just let me go out. And I got myself into trouble where I was swimming out and the waves kept pummeling me. And each time the waves would knock me further down to the bottom, I would begin to lose oxygen. And I got to the point where I was so far out in the ocean, it wasn't all the way out past the waves. And I gradually began to build up with carbon dioxide and lose control of my muscle movements. And these waves kept pushing me down to the bottom. And after about a half hour of this, a little voice in my head said, "This is how you're going to die." And I said, I'm in real trouble here. And I've got to be beyond anything I've ever imagined in regard to, number one, getting myself to safety so that I could catch my breath. So I finally did make it out past that final line of breakers. And I remember lying on my back out in the water for at least an hour, just getting my heart rate down, stopping shaking, praying to God with so much gratitude to save my life. And all I wanted to do was get back to shore safely. And I picked the smallest wave I possibly could. It was probably the size of a building, but it just kind of washed me into shore. And I got to the shore, and I had such a different respect, number one, and no matter how good you are at whatever you're doing, when you're interacting with Mother Nature in severe extreme situations, it doesn't matter how good you are. You still have to be in beginner's mind, and Mother Nature will take you out. And it was prepared to take me out with the one thing that at that point in my life I was most proficient at and very, very good at. So respecting nature, respecting our limits, and making good decisions is the foundation of health.
So as you look back, that little voice that sort of told you that this is going to be right the last day, or you're going to die after that, was that your intuition or something else? What part of your self was that little voice? Because sometimes you have a little voice that tells you take action, or this is your purpose, or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing in your life. Was that one of these little voices, or was that something else?
Good question. Good question. Because I thought I was invincible, and there was no way this ocean could take me down. And over a period of time, gradually becoming physically and mentally toxic from the buildup of carbon dioxide and swallowing water, I was losing my ability to protect myself. And then I never thought in all of my days, a voice in my head said, this is how you're going to die. And that just totally scared me, like beyond anything I've ever felt before in my life. I was probably in my 20s.
Okay.
And it was so humbling to be in the energy of it all
Mm-hmm.
and feel totally powerless.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. Sometimes I love these moments because sometimes, I've heard these stories where, you almost die, but for some reason, there's something, someone, or somewhere out there decided that it's not your time to go. And you have that humbling moment, right? And then I feel, have a greater sacredness or respect for what you have in life, no matter what it is. And it seems like that played a pivotal role in your life going forward.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. A lot of the things we look at on the computer or we see with our eyes, we look at these majestic mountains,
Mm-hmm.
the Himalayas, the Rockies in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
We look at these pictures of the ocean all over the place. It is beautiful beyond anything we can even imagine. And it just feels amazing and wholesome, and it connects us with something beyond ourselves. But on the other hand, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, nature doesn't care. It doesn't matter your skill sets. You will be leaving the planet. And I see it all the time. People of great skill, professional athletes, skiers, surfers, people out in the environment of the highest level, brought right to their knees and taken off the planet. And it is just a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ed, in 1994, you decided to do the 22.5-mile around the island swim, right?
Yes.
So that, I believe, based on what you write in your book, was a very pivotal time in your life. So talk to us about what was happening before in your life that made you want to take that decision. And then talk to us about actually making that decision of doing this 22.5-mile around the island swim.
Well, where I grew up in southern New Jersey, it was right below Atlantic City. And since the early 50s, there would be a couple guys who would want to race around the island. And it was a huge swim event. And there would be all sorts of parties and boats and floats. And it was just like the biggest day of the year if you were a local resident. As I never thought I could do it when I was a kid watching these folks. It wasn't any part of my thought process. But in the late 80s, early 90s, I was an unhappy husband. I just had 2 baby girls, and I was in an unhappy marriage and unhappy business. And I was making choices with aligning myself with the army of darkness. And my life was spiraling out of control. And I reached to my old friend from a child being in the ocean. And I started to practice endurance swimming, being in the water for hours and hours. To me, I felt at home. I felt safe. I felt at one with my life. And it was a place where I began to create escapism for myself temporarily, and just allow the universe to maybe show me some different avenues of where I could start to repair my life. So I mentioned to a childhood mentor of mine who had done it before one day that I would like to try to do the around the island swim. And he just laughed at me, and it's just like, Ed, you don't want to do this.
Okay.
This is going to be the hardest thing you're ever going. It's just brutal. And as soon as you said I couldn't do it, that was the crux, the leverage to get me to prove that I could do it. And this gentleman, Bill Howarth, ended up being my coach for the race. And this was 6 months intense training in the pool and in the ocean. And then the day of the race, it was just an amazing event of self-discovery. It was an amazing event of perseverance. It was an amazing exhibition of the human spirit. I was only 30, young 30, so I really had no idea energetically what was happening to me. I was just pushing willpower through the water. And as I look back on it, as I began to develop the Eastern arts in my life and softening around the Western strategies that were so pushed on me as a child, now I can understand a little more about energetically what happened, in my energetic systems, my pelvis. So I can tell you it was 11 hours, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an amazing energetic journey into the human mind. It was much like taking psychedelics. You eventually destroy your sense of self, your normal 9 to 5 ego, and that resists vehemently being destructed. And taking that wall down brick by brick is an arduous process. But once that wall comes down, there's a whole nother playing field that opens up in your heart and your mind where you're totally a fearless human being. Fear doesn't even exist. Like your mind won't even host resistance. Like you can't do it. Once we destruct our normal construct of social modeling and internal boundaries, which limit our ability to feel, they limit our ability to grow, they limit our ability to live from our heart. So it was an amazing just journey into the human experience. And it was I could never do it again. I would never even want to do it again. But I wish every human being would have the opportunity to experience what happens when your ego falls away and you take it down, and the energy of your pelvic basin, this huge golden white light atomic bomb energy, comes up into your head, and you're so dialed in to the energy of the planet, you become one with your environment. And what was really amazing to me is that day was the first time in my life that I really learned how to swim. And it took me about 16, 17 miles before I became one with the water. And I stopped resisting the water. The molecules of my body became one with the molecules of the water. And what I mean by that is that I stopped pulling through the water. I let the water move through me. And when I could let the water molecules move through me, and I took my willpower and basically took it away from the effort, nature just pushed me into this ride that was so transformational. I can cry about it just right now, even thinking about it. It's 30 some years ago. It was just like it happened 5 minutes ago. And I wish everyone can experience what's really inside us when we go into ourselves.
Wow. That is really, really inspiring. It speaks to the nature of the human soul or the human consciousness, right? Because on one hand, you said that your mentor said that you cannot do it, or you don't even bother trying. But there's something within you. So did that something within you want to prove him wrong? Or was it something, were you an A-type personality who wanted to conquer challenges? Or does it happen only to some people? Because, you have people who want to conquer the mountain, although climbing the Mount Everest is so dangerous, it can surely kill you. And then there are people who want to go, deep into the depths of the ocean. And there are all these types of people, just like yourself, who want to test or push beyond the boundaries. So was it something within you? Is this possible for other people as well to say, you know what, I'm not done it before, but something about this makes me want to go on this adventure and see, where how long I can last, or see what my limits are. of my physical and emotional and mental self?
Great question. Great question. I've learned a lot in my life from the word no. And some of it has been really good, and some of it has been not so good. I grew up grasping for straws, trying to fit in to this world, at the time not realizing how sensitive I was in regard to everyone else's opinion of me, and trying to fit in this super competitive environment that I was growing. I'd love to be competitive, and I didn't mind losing because I always was going to do my best. But I just had a sensitivity of feeling empty inside as a human being, and I didn't know what was inside that emptiness. And the only time when I was younger and I was stronger, the only time I really felt full was when I took a no and I turned it into a yes.
So powerful. I don't think I realize how powerful this statement is that you made. Can you talk to me a bit more about this emptiness? Because I somehow intuitively feel that a lot of our listeners around the world right now seem to be feeling that emptiness. And a lot of times, logically, they're doing well in their career or maybe in their family or in different aspects of their life, but deep down, they still feel that emptiness. And it's interesting that you had to find a no and convert that into a yes in order to really feel that level of. I'll allow you to to share how you felt after that 22.5 mile swim.
Well, I just basically felt like I was lovable just as I am. Like I didn't need to do that, but it was done. And I just felt this immense, after that, I was like, I was okay. It's such a shallow expression of the human experience. And I think we gradually go into different layers of ourselves during different times of our life.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important that we surround ourselves with a good tribe, because I think in the practices that I've practiced myself and the clients that I work with, a lot of the people who are doing really, really well aren't a good judge of themselves. I don't, they're extremely hard on themselves, or they let things slide and they're really easy on themselves. I don't think we really see what we look like because we're always looking out. We don't have eyes looking back on us. We don't have a reflection like a TV showing us what we're looking like. So we're kind of walking around in the dark, and we can't really see the courage it takes every day sometimes just to show up for life. And we kind of miss these little steps, these little things, because life is about little things that are filled with great quality. And then if you have quantity after that, that's fine. But, everybody, wants to change. And, people come to me, Ed, I want to change. And I'm like, my friend, nobody changes. You either get better or you get worse. Why would you want to change? I know everything didn't go your way in your life. Everybody's life is like that. We've had some victories. Life is one step forward, two steps back. It happened like that for all of us. We almost have to get what we don't want before we get what we want. And I don't think we understand the process of how hard nature works just to feed us. When you look at a stalk of corn, it's got 10,000 leaves to make 100 kernels. Yeah. Like, how hard that plant had to work for 6 months out of the year to give us one ear of corn. And I think we kind of miss like the big picture of how this planet works.
And speaking about the planet and the universe, you write that the universe in all its wisdom led you to yoga and conscious yogic breathing pranayama. So how did you discover the practice? Where were you, and what was happening in your life, and how did that connection happen?
Well, I've always been a kinesthetic learner. I wasn't the sharpest student in the Western mindset of memorization and repetition. So I always came to my body to get the truth. And I began to understand how my body moved, and it made me feel really good about myself. And when I felt good about myself, I had good, positive thinking about myself. And I was always a visual learner. I did very well watching and reading the environment. And being an energy junkie, someone who really just enjoys this human body. I mean, all of it, good, bad, positive emotion, painful emotion. It's all just part of being in this uniform here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And when I discovered yogic pranayama, I knew my life was never, ever, ever, ever going to be the same. I knew that every moment of my life, from this mark in time to when I take my last breath, is always going to be about breathing. It's always going to be about the quality of my breath, which reflects the quality of my heart, which reflects the quality of my neurochemistry, and reflects the quality of my body posture and movements. So I in some way, I didn't have words for it at the time because there wasn't any words to describe how the breath starts to take you into yourself in places where your normal psyche doesn't want you looking around. It likes the way that is. It likes that habit, and it wants that habit to continue. It likes that drinking habit, and it wants you to continue to live in that vein of life. You know, because you have to understand the brain just works on habits, and the brain isn't self-aware. It doesn't understand what you're doing is killing you.
Right.
It doesn't understand that negative thinking creates disease. It doesn't understand that every time it tells you to drug yourself, that you're causing damage to your temple. You know, we have the heart, the mind, and the breath, but the brain, in all of its genius, isn't awake.
And so that first experience that you had of pranayama, was it that you read a book and you tried to do an exercise, or did you attend a class in a group, or what's that story like?
My first experience with pranayama, I went to a weekend retreat
Okay.
at the Kripalu Yoga Center in Massachusetts. And it's the largest yoga center in North America. And it was a weekend retreat, and the program was called the Inner Quest Intensive. And there was about 100 of us, and they locked us away for 72 hours. And I didn't know what to expect, but somebody said, Ed, you're in a transitional point of your life. You need to take this program. And I trusted her, and I just drove 5 hours to the place and showed up, and it's all vegetarian food, and everybody's walking around in cool clothes. And I'm like the jock coming out with the football. I didn't know what was going on. So it just started the first evening, and there was this thing around slowing our breath down. And I didn't know anything about that. And it was like, close your mouth when you're breathing. I didn't know anything about that. And then there was this thing called this ujjayi breathing, where you learn to breathe through your throat and your nose at once. So this is the first introductory evening, and we're doing a little of this gentle breathing, and we're all getting the feel for each other. It's like a kind of insane asylum, really. Like it's like 100 people all looking to find something to hang on to in our lives.
Yeah.
And we're all coming. We have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. So we did some of the diaphragmatic breathing, the ujjayi breathing. Everything's done very slowly and mindfully. And then they lie us down on the floor, and we had about a 20-minute shavasana. About 15 minutes into it, my whole life changed. I was lying down on my back, it was in my mind, and a thread of cognition came to me that I thought was a rock solid truth. It was the bedrock, the foundations of my personality. And it came to me and showed me that it was a lie and it was not true. And at that point, the curious part of my mind said to me in a relaxed way, it said, Ed, if that's not true, what else isn't true that you think is true? I fell deep in my mind, and as I relaxed deeper into my brain, I could see that the fears that I was holding in my mind about life was camouflaging amazing strengths that I wasn't able to tap into just yet in my life. And I came out of that shavasana and I was just a changed person, and my life hasn't been the same since.
I think there might be some internet issues that was causing some, interruptions.
Do you want to try
Would
to
you be,
change my internet?
yeah, is it possible, like, if you're able to connect like a hardwire? And if it's not possible, that's fine. But I was really enjoying the part where you were talking about your shavasana. That's why.
Hang on. I got I'm going to try put my,
Okay.
what's your SM J?
Yeah. Sorry.
I got this.
Okay.
Right, we're good.
Okay.
Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Shit, is there a thing with it? I think
Is it good?
we good?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, you can hear me, right? Oops. Can you hear me now? Oops. We are going to resolve this internet issue and be back. Let us know if you are able to see me or if you're able to hear me right now. Can you hear me, Ed? So I think you're muted at the moment. Yeah.
I apologize. Hello?
Yeah.
I'm here, AJ.
Okay, great. You can hear me right now, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so Ed, you were talking about the Shavasana experience that lasted for 15 minutes. So I was hoping you could, restart from there and I can edit the portion out.
Okay. Shavasana, my first Shavasana experience changed my life. I had just completed some conscious breathing and I'm in a totally new environment with 100 different people. We lie down on the floor, we get covered with a blanket. I slow my breath down. I get guided into Shavasana. And about 10 minutes into it, I began to listen to my brain in a way that I've never listened to my brain before. There wasn't any emotion to the information. It was just information. And there were some bedrocks in my mind that were the solid truths that I was hanging on to about myself, my world at that particular time in my life. And I'm watching the ticker tape of the film in my mind in the Shavasana, deeply relaxed. And I look up into my mind, and my mind says to me that there's a particular truth that you hold in your life, and it shows it to me, and it says, it's not true, it's a lie. And as soon as I heard that was a lie, there's another part of my mind that said immediately, if that's not true, what else do you tell yourself when your life is a truth that is a non-truth? And then I was well on my way of having almost a second childhood of reframing how my brain was working with my body in regard to my inner dialogue and how I was acting out in the world with the external world. And what I began to see was that the fears that I was holding around the limiting belief system that was holding me back in my life were camouflaging the greatest gifts of what I wanted to bring to the world. It was really amazing.
Wow. Sounds really, really fascinating. And you also write that the teachers at Kripalu encouraged you to practice the opposite approach, which was to try to feel everything. The more I could feel, they explained, the more clear life would become. So, what does it mean to feel into everything? And what were you avoiding before this?
Well, I think I was living a kind of a Western top-down type of life where everything was thought-oriented and emotions and feelings were just something that were beneath thoughts. Emotions weren't important. How you felt wasn't important. What was important was how far you went in school or the grades that you had in school. And what I began to find out through the practices of yoga and breathing and meditation is that life is a bottom up event first. Learning how to embody the thought, learning how to feel the thought, allowing your body to help you navigate the thinking world so that you're always making the right choice or the best choices possible. Because the body doesn't have an ego. It does what it needs to do in the present moment to get us moment through moment. It can make suggestions, but it's not nearly as powerful as the brain, as we used the mind to train the brain in the West. And the belly was just something to use to carry the head around. What I tried to do was try to harness this sensitivity to emotion that I had my whole life, but I was misreading the emotion. I was looking at it through weakness. I was looking at it through insecurity. I was looking at it that I'm not good enough and life isn't going to work out. When actually the emotion was trying to show me the exact opposite, is that you are okay. You do have value. And this sensitivity is something that's going to be with you your whole life. You can't turn off sensitivity. So when I began to feel first and think second, my life began to change in a way that there was a lot less drama. There was a lot less trauma. Mm. And the good thing about emotional intelligence is that it's a raw form of intelligence. And when you're working with a raw form of intelligence, life becomes simple if you can allow it. Because when you're working with the gut, there's only 3 answers to every question. You agree, you disagree, or you don't know yet. So I think in the complexity of what we're living in the world today, finding tools of simplicity, I think can really add to personal growth very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And also in talking about, you explore the different emotions and how they affect us, in your book, like fear can sometimes hold us back. And you talk about shame as well, the emotion of shame. You write, shame is an energy thief, but you can thwart its effort by shining a light on the roots of your shame and objectively examining them. As long as the roots remain buried, you feed them with the deep belief that you deserve to feel ashamed and aren't worthy of love exactly as you are. Shame makes you feel heavy and dense, whereas love, forgiveness, and gratitude lift you up and make you feel light and bright. So how does this unconscious, deeply rooted feeling of shame affect our life? And then some guidance around what we can do it, because I'm sure that each one of us from childhood has some level of shame that, although we've logically forgotten about it, we're carrying it maybe in our solar plexus, in our stomach, or maybe somewhere in our body.
Well, I think we have to understand that life is not a competitive event board out there per se. Life is an experience, and Earth is a planet of lessons. It's a school, and failure doesn't exist. There's only lessons. And when we think about how we can work emotions we don't communicate. In other words, when I feel shame or I feel guilty, notice if there isn't any dialogue or any communication with that intruder that's robbed me of this human heart and my ability to self-correct or grow. It's very scary. I think the first thing folks need to understand is that there's an interconnectedness to all of this. And using positive emotions in a positive way begins by first acknowledging that for this moment, I don't feel comfortable. There is a thought of inadequacy there. And then we choose to learn our lessons through the lens of fear rather than learn the lessons of life through the lens of love. We are choosing our experiences. And when we're lacking esteem, when we're lacking self-confidence, when we feel separate from the collective, it's very easy to go down this rabbit hole and think that somehow I don't have a fully functional happy gene and everybody else in the world is happy but me. And, you know, the stories we tell ourselves, it's simply insane. But we don't communicate internally with the intruder. We let it tell us how it's going to be. And we feel very small initially against the big shamer or the bully or, the guilt. So I think it's an awareness model of first noticing that I've kind of lost body and I'm stuck in my head with a series of rotational thoughts which aren't serving me, and then slowing the breath down so that we're creating safety in the body. We're bringing our blood pressure down. We're bringing our heart rate down. We're starting to metabolize our fat stores rather than our glucose. As the brain sees the slower breathing, it assumes that we are safe. You'll notice when we are threatened, we breathe very quickly. We breathe very shallow. And it strengthens the emotion. And begin that size pieces.
Oh, I think we lost you again there for the audio. Can you hear me?
I can do it again.
Now it's better. I can
hear you.
Yeah, now it's better. Sorry, I think there's some internet issue in between, but I can hear you now.
You ready?
Yeah.
You want me to pick that right up?
Yes.
So when we sense threat, we need to consciously communicate with that intruder rather than run away from it or squash it further down. When we can, notice your piece is threatened. How do you know your piece has been threatened? A good cue will be that your exhale starts to get shorter than your inhale. As if you were actually chased by a bear. So notice breathing. As long as your exhale is longer than your in, the lower part of the fight or flight center, the war department, the hypothalamus, which controls heart rates and blood pressure and neurochemistry. We start to tone down the lower animal brain.
Mm-hmm.
You've been triggered. You're not going to fix it by fighting with it. You're just going to make it stronger. And as you breathe a focused breath, the higher brain will turn on, the hippocampus.
Mm-hmm.
And as you simply watch the intruder and breathe with it, you'll see it begins to change its story. It knows that you've caught it in its lie. And it begins to run away from you now because it doesn't want you to find out that it is a fib.
Wonderful. And you're talking about this slow, conscious breath where you're exhaling longer than you're inhaling, those nice long exhales. You also talk about the benefits of nasal breathing, right? You write that babies and children usually breathe through their noses. So what causes us to switch from predominantly nasal breathing to mouth breathing? And when does that typically happen?
It usually happens right after our ego begins to develop in its early stages, somewhere between the ages of 5 and 10. What happens is that when we're young, we're very emotional and we want to have high energy all the time. So what happens is we begin to see that if we breathe through our mouth and hyperventilate, we can create a hyperarousal state in the body, which super energizes us, which is fine, but you can't sustain that energy for long because the body can't hold that large charge. And eventually you crash, you get moody, your parents give you sugar, and then you're back up again. And you're just all over the place. We love energy.
Mm-hmm.
We want to feel young, all of us. When we start to set in motion to the brain, which I was speaking earlier of, basically is not awake. The brain just works on habits and rhythm. So if you begin to shut down your nasal breathing you were born with, mm-hmm. and you start to insert mouth breathing during your conscious hours, this is what the brain is going to think you want to do. It doesn't know any better. And then that's going to lead to all sorts of health issues and dysfunctional issues very on in regard to the structures of the skeletal face, which we know are so debilitating to the brain and the cervical spine. It throws off our sleep patterns. It causes shallow breathing in the chest. So for me, my journey was 25 years ago, stopping any mouth breathing at all, whether it be in relationship or exercise. And over a period of time, your brain begins to remember that this is how you were breathing when you were born before your personality developed.
Interesting. And so in addition to nasal breathing, you write about the psoas muscle, and you write that the psoas muscle is called the muscle of our soul, and the fact that it is deeply connected with fear and anxiety. So I don't know much about this muscle. So could you talk to us about how our breathing is connected to our psoas muscle and how we can maybe biohack it or maybe regulate it in order to release some of that fear and anxiety and breathe more fully?
Beautiful. So psoas muscle is right here. There's two of them.
Okay.
And they're very deep muscles, and they connect the lower body with the upper torso.
Okay.
It's a very unique muscle. Now, the thoracic diaphragm muscle, which is our primary inhale muscle, on the inhale, it moves down and it creates structure in the low back. And the diaphragm muscle connects with the tendons of the psoas muscles. Okay. And most of us don't have any awareness of the psoas muscle. Most of us don't have any awareness of the thoracic diaphragm. But these two muscles play a huge role in how you think, how you use your energy, whether you're in rhythm, whether you're in focus. So when we think of the psoas muscle and the diaphragm muscle, Think of your feet.
Yeah.
When you inhale, this inflow of energy goes down and connects your legs and feet to the planet. We as a culture have left being grounded in our lower body mechanics for the computer screen. It's fine from time to time, but to be grounded and connected to the earth is probably the highest calling all of us can do right now, especially during these challenging times of we're not really too sure of how the future is going to pan out. So the psoas muscle was taught to me as being the most spiritual muscles in the body because it connects us with the earth. It connects the grounding rods of our legs into the grounding rods of the planet. And when we're grounded in the intelligence of the body, the mind is completely grounded also. And we are calm. We don't on to the moment. We're a much better listener. We don't over talk or under talk. So there's a lot of connections that come from the nasal breathing, the diaphragm, and the psoas muscles.
Interesting, interesting. And what I like about your book is you talk about so many different systems and processes that happen within our body that I did not know about. For example, you talk about the enteric nervous system, which is in the middle of the solar plexus. And that, I believe, helps us tap into those beautiful production of serotonin and dopamine. I believe 95% serotonin and 15% dopamine. And you describe it in a very beautiful way, just like the sun, but inside our own body. So could you talk to us a little bit about this enteric nervous system and how we can really tap into it using our breathing?
So the enteric nervous system is the smallest and fifth nervous system of the human body. Mm-hmm. It's located right here in our solar plex region of our body, which remarkably is the center of our third chakra, of the subtle world. And let's just back it up a little bit. When you think about when you're breathing, if you're breathing shallow or you're breathing through your mouth, the air is just coming in to the upper lobes of your lungs, and you're not getting that diaphragm flattening down, stoking circulation and energy to the third chakra and your enteric nervous system. So this is why it's so important to breathe through your nose, because the nostrils will create the suction for the diaphragm to move down and massage this energy center of the body, which is the home of the gut brain. The enteric nervous system receiving the massage coming down, the pressure on the inhale, and then on the exhale, it's going to come, the diaphragm is going to come up, and that suction there is going to lift the enteric system up and down, up and down. It's going to go with each breath 20,000 times a day. So the enteric system plays a huge role in the serotonin and dopamine expression of our gastrointestinal organs. In other words, how we feel about ourselves. Are we flowing with the experience of our life? Or are we going through something short, bumpy, and jumpy? Are we disconnected from the gut brain? Mm-hmm. So thinking about feeling good, dopamine. Think about being relaxed and oxygenated, serotonin. This is all coming from this gut. And when we can improve our digestion, elimination, and assimilation of our nutrition efficiently, effectively, quickly, we alkaline our gut. And the blood that's moving through our gut is super oxygenated, carrying a lot of hemoglobin. It's not a dirty, acidic blood carrying lots of toxins and fats and excessive mucus and viruses, which again is going to delete immunity, which is formed from the gut. So alkalining the gut and being light in the gut. And it really doesn't matter what it looks like. the gut. You know, it matters what the gut feels like. The gut is our master feeler. It reads the environment for us organically.
Mhm.
And it is the gateway to the heart. As we begin to feel better about ourselves, that energy of the enteric system lifts 6 inches up into our heart. And then we begin to think with our heart.
Mhm.
Then the brain moves 6 inches down into the heart. And then we begin to take our 5 sense perception and we run it not through the brain first, we run it through the heart first. And that is the essence of feeling the moment before we act with the moment.
Mhm. And you talk about so many different benefits of breathing and how it can affect our nervous system and our gut and our heart and the way we think and operate and look at the world. But how can somebody listening to this episode right now improve their lung capacity so that they can start breathing more deeply and not shallowly and get the full benefit of breathing?
It's it is just something that you must do.
Mhm.
This time that we're in, you must make this move right now. Everyone must become nasal dominant.
Mhm.
Everyone must be able to stretch this lung. Our lungs are huge. The lungs are where we hold our grief, where we hold our shame. And when we host these powerful emotions, what's the first thing we do? We stop breathing, AJ.
Right.
We stop utilizing our ability to keep the intruder moving along. We freeze.
Mhm.
And whatever it is, we think it's better than we are. We have to reverse this. It begins by number one, connecting yourself with the planet, feet down, strong. You press your feet down like you're going to stand up. And as soon as you engage that, your spine, what's it do? It's perfectly straight. Now look at how you can breathe and circulate fresh energy and remove toxins and lower inflammation just by that. Feet down, press down like you're going to stand up, and immediately your heart pops out and your spine is straight. Now you're ready to breathe. Go to your face. Relax your eyes and jaw completely. Be like a young baby. We want the two prefrontal cortexes, which are the most awake area of the brain. We don't want these tense. We don't want to cut off blood supply here. We want to be awake and conscious. So if you just say to yourself silently, release and relax your eyes, release and relax your eyes, you'll notice almost instantaneously, you can sense the enteric nervous system and you can sense a relaxation response to the pace of the film you're watching. Where do we hold the rest of our attention? Our low jaw. So just saying to yourself, release and relax my low jaw. Release and relax my low jaw. Separate the teeth a fraction of an inch. Unweight that masseter, that major muscle there on the low jaw. And you want that tongue on the upper palate. And that'll open the maxilla, the upper jawbone. It'll dilate the nostrils. So if you want to stretch your lung tissue, you know I'm a big nasal believer. That's all I ever do. But there's a tool that we can use to really stretch lung tissue, inflating it fully and deflating it fully. So simple. You get the body into alignment. You inhale as much as you can through your nose, and you just inhale as much as you can. And you'll think your lungs are filled, but you purse your lips like a little bird, and you take a little more air in. And you can feel that is a full expression of your lung tissue. You'll hold the breath in a couple seconds. You'll exhale slowly through your nose as much as you can. And you think there's no more air there. But then you purse your lips like a bird and you pretend you're blowing out a birthday candle. That's a full deflation of your lungs. So in real time, It might be sit up tall in your mind, relax your face, inhale as slowly as you can through your nose from your belly to your chest, and then open your mouth, take a quick hit of air in, hold the breath in. Exhale slowly through your nose to completion. The rest through the mouth like you're blowing out a candle. Pause. Inhale through your nose again. Now through the mouth. Just open your chest. After a couple seconds, you'll feel the chest just open, this beautiful heart, and you exhale slowly through your nose, the rest through the mouth, and then just practice that for 3 or 4 times, maybe every 4 hours, just for 1 week. And tell me if you don't sleep better. Tell me if you don't crave healthier food. Tell me if you don't think clearly. Tell me if you're not emoting with great clarity. And tell me if you don't have a greater connection to the purpose of why we have a human heart.
Wonderful. That is an amazing technique that I'm sure our listeners are going to try, and I'm going to try certainly. And I appreciate you helping us improve our lung capacity through this simple breathing technique. And Ed, you also write about neuroplasticity, the ability to change our brains and our heart. And at the core of it, you write, is how we breathe. So firstly, what type of brain change are we talking about here? And how, hypothetically, how long, I mean, is there any study that talks about how long this brain change takes?
Well, depending on the amount of time you've placed on a particular thought from your past, that will be a common denominator in regard to how long it's going to take you to rewire that particular perception. Mm-hmm. That's the big stuff. The smaller stuff, right? So in other words, things that are causing us stress, we can neutralize those. And then not having a visceral effect, each time that thought comes up, the breath becomes shallow or you become tight. That's the goal. So the next time that thought comes up, there isn't any visceral effect in the body. So to create neuroplasticity in the brain, or in other words, evolve our story. Mm-hmm. In other words, you have this theory or you have this perception about a person, place, or thing. And then how do we evolve that to 2021, even though it happened 30 years ago? How do we do that? The first thing we need to do is create safety in the brain. We don't want the brain to feel threat at all. When the brain senses threat, there is no learning. There will only be a replay of that old event, and it will play itself out in the narrative the same way. Shutting down the lower brain and turning on the higher brain. This will happen when you breathe through your nose. The old story is encased in inflammation. The brain is encased with a layer of inflammation. When you breathe through your nose, your brain creates a molecule called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is an anti-inflammatory molecule. It works in the brain and in the body. So the brain actually breaks down the host for these old thought forms, which are old and obsolete, but from time to time show up in our mind in real time, and then we go down that rabbit hole. So slowing the inhale down to the pace of a snail, your brain senses safety, because if you were in danger, you would breathe fast through your mouth to your nose. So you hack into the brain, practicing inhaling as slowly as you can and making a relaxed environment in the brain. so that departments can talk to each other. As you lay on that exhale, and the exhale being longer than the inhale, your body burns fat instead of sugar. The old story is embedded in our fat cells. Glucose cells are only in our body energized every 24 hours. You have about 90 minutes of sugar stores every day that you burn every day. So that comes in and out every day, and it doesn't vibrate with the old story because it's not in you long enough. But fat cells know our whole story because we tell ourselves that story over and over again.
Right.
So when we stay on that exhale, the body goes into a fat burning mode. The next inhale will not have the same trigger that it had the last time. Remember, the mind is our best friend, and we move into the role of the observer. We just observe the mind. We witness it. We don't judge it. We don't compare, and we don't label. So the slower we breathe, we turn on a natural, organic, inherent process of being in a growth mode, so that we're learning one new thing every day. And what's remarkable is if you learn one new thing every day, you also forget one old thing that happened 20 years ago in your dream that has no bearing on the great person who you are today. So neuroplasticity takes place organically and naturally. In other words, there's a new awareness around an old memory. Much like when you go into shavasana, these old fears come up, but there's no emotional pull to them. It's just a thread of information. And then as you look at it in a slower brainwave pattern, a theta brainwave pattern, or an alpha brainwave pattern, then you can begin to see that it's happening for a reason, and it's designed to help you grow, not hurt you and hold you back.
So I really, really love the breakdown and how you told us about the way that our consciousness and our awareness works, and the process of slowly but surely letting go of our attachment to something that happened 10, 15, or 20 years back by focusing on new things and learning new things and practicing those wonderful deep breaths, long exhales, and breathing in and out through the nose, nasal breathing. So Ed, like you mentioned, you work with a lot of different high performance athletes, peak performers, CEOs, executives, and people who want to, be the best each and every day and have a vision that they want to share with the world and they want to make an impact. What do you think is the future of breathwork? What are some new avenues, perhaps, that you feel as an expert, as an author, breathwork needs to reach or is reaching?
I think that breath work is going to become huge. I think it's going to be taught in schools. I think it's going to be taught to athletic teams. I know it's being taught in some of the new age corporations, so that people are at peak performance level and in rhythm as they move through the day. So I think we're slowly backing our way into what the ancients knew long ago, is that everything runs off the breath. It is the primary sense organ. It connects us with the mind and the body, but it connects us with why we're doing what we're doing, our soul, the part of us that's completely whole. It connects us with our spirit. It covers every dimension, every platform that any person who's breathing on the planet, any animal on the planet, has a relationship with their breath. And I want folks to acknowledge that there's a therapeutic application available to all of us in everything that we do in our life. And making sure that the breath is in your toolbox, number one, when you need to be stimulated and be on. Number two, when you've been triggered and you need to dial back and relax. The breath is there as a tool to bring us present. For me, it was about getting out of my head and living in my heart.
Mhm.
My heart for me is a lot easier to understand because my heart speaks in ways that I can understand. It's very simple. And it's either I agree, I disagree, or I don't know. But I believe that therapeutic breath work will be in all of therapy, physical therapy, and place where you can add breath and find faster improvement with wear and tear, achieve your desired goal in less, manifest it in less time.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Ed, for talking us through all these different concepts and topics and mechanisms of how our body operates and how to change our breath, but also how to change our life. Um, for somebody who loved what you shared and wants to learn more, how can they learn more about you and get a copy of your book?
They can go to my website, which is www.edharrold.com and go to my, there's lots of different ways that we interact together. I have a huge video library with all sorts of different channels that can help you start to create a relationship with your breath, or if you already have one, you can learn all sorts of other different strategies and concepts to go to that next level. The site has my books and my trainings. So I'm looking forward to meeting you and being that spoke on your wheel that just get down that road a little smoother.
Awesome, Action Tribe. We'll have this link up in the show notes. Make sure that you visit Ed's website. He's the best of the best, and he has an amazing way to explain. He's got numerous videos on YouTube, so make sure you check them out as well. If you are interested in breathwork and you want to learn how to influence these changes in your body and your brain, and most importantly, change your life. So, Ed, once again, thank you so much for coming on our show, talking to us about breathwork and mixing it and how you've mixed it with sports and movement and mobility and corporate life, and how you've changed people's lives all around the world and taking us one step closer to a human revolution.
Thank you so much, AJ. I really enjoyed being with you. You're an amazing host. It was great being your guest, and I wish you nothing but the best, my friend.